Hi, welcome to the Risk Channel podcast brought to you by ASC International, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Risk Channels podcast brought to you by ASC International. My name is Jeremy,
And my name's Raphael.
and today we have the founder and CEO of ASC International, Mark Zetta, with us today.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Of course, it's a pleasure
Yes,
as
sir.
ours. All right, and today's topic is going to be about Uber and Lyft safety and the implications of Uber and Lyft in today's day and age, insurance implications, safety implications, just the overall just impact on society. So to start off, what do you guys think about Uber and Lyft?
I mean, it's convenient. It's modern. Scary in many ways, but very convenient, very modern, and honestly, a very ingenious idea, which has been replicated by a myriad of companies. So it just goes to show you how ingenious it was. But yeah, I mean, definitely an awesome idea.
Sure. What do you think of it, Jeremy?
I think it's I think it's a Marvel idea in the sense that like you can capitalize on being your own boss in a sense, or being self-employed. So you can kind of work on your own time. Like you can work whenever you want. You can work at 12 a.m. if you want to. You can work at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, 6 a.m. in the morning, so on and so forth. I do have some drawbacks, such as like the pricing of how much money Uber gets compared to the driver itself. But overall, I think it's a good idea in theory. But there are some negative drawbacks, as in everything. There's nothing's ever going to be 100% perfect. But that's my idea or my thoughts on it.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's very true. Nothing's ever gonna be perfect, but like at the same time, like I see what you're saying though. Like you can be like your own boss in a sense. Um, but that's not 100% true because, as we all know, Uber is like a whole company, and you are just another for that company. So we really don't know, like who's in charge of you and stuff like that. Yes, you may have some freedom to what kind of hours you can work, but it's flexible for that reason. But are you really your own boss?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that. It's a subscriber based service, right? So you sign up to be a user, um, and you're you're governed by their terms that they dictate when you accept them and at sign up, right? And you know, are we all attorneys, right? The amount of terms and conditions, it leaves a lot of ambiguity for what you can and cannot do. And it's a contract. So at the end of the day, if something goes haywire, the contract's more likely than not. Again, keep in mind that I haven't read it entirely, nor do I intend to, because I don't intend to drive for them. But typically, the contract goes in the favor of the drafter as opposed to the person on the other side. So, and those are very unilateral contracts because why? Can you go in and edit the terms and conditions when you accept Apple's terms? Probably not. More likely, definitely not. So, like I said, you become more or less a user of their platform, but subject to their governance, and if you violate that, they can terminate you. Right? How many business owners get terminated by somebody? So are you really a business owner? They can terminate you and no longer utilize you as part or for their services. So I don't know if you're really a business owner, but you do have autonomy. You have the ability to flip the switch on and say, "Hey, I'm working today." You don't have to get that clearance from a boss per se, right? So that's unique, and it's a second source of revenue, or even, like I said, a primary source of revenue, because not everybody is using it as secondary means. Some of them are using it as primary source of revenue, primary source of income. Um, but there are a lot of insurance implications that have still not even been ironed out, and that's only time will tell where that goes. So there are several things that are scary there, especially in today's day and age. With crime being through the roof, and litigation expenses, and litigation meaning lawsuits being so happening every other second, and the awards being so significant. So there is a lot to be weary of if you're going to be a driver for Uber or Lyft, or if you're even going to get in the vehicle, because you essentially could become the victim. So great idea, but like every good idea, it takes time to, I don't want to say perfect, because nothing's ever really perfected, but time to really map it out so it's as close to perfect as possible. That's going to take time. The first Apple computer wasn't perfect, right? But they've done a really good job. Even Microsoft's initial software wasn't perfect, but it's come far, right?
Yeah, I agree.
What do you guys think?
I believe, Ref, you want to go first?
Pardon?
Or you want to go first?
You could go first.
All right, thank you. I believe that I agree with the majority of what you said, that it's gone far in a lot of ways. And also, it's like the autonomy of it and how you can become your own boss and just go work out those little kinks and making a living off of it. I mean, I've seen some guy on the internet. He talked about how he was able to make a living, basically, but he was working like graveyard hours. Like he was doing the craziest hours, like 16-hour days on Uber,
Jeez.
and then maybe 8-hour days on Lyft, and then switching them back and forth just so he can afford an apartment in San Francisco. So this guy was just basically grinding himself into like tooth and nail to afford off Uber. I mean, is it worth it at that point to then getting a regular, like, let's say, office 9 to 5? I would say probably not. I mean, unless you want that freedom, but it's not really free if you read the fine agreement. So there's a lot of like implications like that where it's like, yes, you are free, but I put that in heavy quotations because there are,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, there's always somebody looking over you. Because if you don't
Yeah.
work, all right, they can replace you just like out of job. All right, there's 7,000 other people who are gonna take this person to a destination that they want. Why do we need you? Type thing. Like, oh, you can come back, but based on the rating system, you're not gonna be as favorable as a driver as somebody who has more experience, more ratings, more interaction with people on that type of basis. So you basically have to either slave yourself into doing it multiple times and just doing it over and over again, day by day, to get on the high rating system, do the algorithm, or you can do it on and off like a part-time thing, but you're still working another job on top of that. So it's more of a side gig or a side hustle than an actual
Well, there you go.
own business. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that kind of goes back to one of one of your earlier episodes about side hustles, right? I mean, I wouldn't say it's a side hustle; it's a secondary job, because a side hustle is like really something that you want to eventually make your primary means. So you're utilizing right now your primary source of income to help subsidize that until that side hustle really becomes something with traction, right? Which most young entrepreneurs have to do, because I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Life is expensive today, and it's not that easy just to get going. Like, how many people have just like expendable means to start a business? It's not that easy, right?
Yeah.
But let's get past that, right? It's a secondary source of income, like these Ubers and Lyfts, because they do give you flexibility. So when you clock out of your main job, right, you can then clock in here and then clock out at whatever time you want to, because you need to get sleep for now, the main job that starts at 9 a.m. in the morning, on Tuesday or whatever it is, right? The piece to that, though, is, or what I would consider a relative piece to that is, you're not guaranteed any sort of income, right? So like, while there are a lot of users out there, and what you made a mention about an algorithm earlier, that's going to help again, I'm not an Uber expert. It's just common sense. Those requests for usage are going to go to, like you said, higher rated drivers, right? So if you have 20 drivers in one single location and one person looking to get picked up, the odds are that the higher rated drivers that have been driving for a longer period of time are more likely going to get the favor, more of a shot at that pickup, right? Which hurts, number one, right? Because why? You're trying to start now as a secondary means of income in maybe a smaller or less populated community, which means that you're going to be at the bottom of the barrel, right? You're not going to get nearly as many ride opportunities. But the other thing is, and this is where I'm a big proponent, is they put this camouflage on as if you're your own boss, right? And it takes away actually from the actual people that could potentially be successful entrepreneurs and start their own businesses for, in my opinion, you know, their own sense of means, right? Because even look at their payment structure. Who gets the majority of the pay when somebody's picked up and dropped off? Which doesn't make sense to me, because why? You're a driver for Uber, and you pick somebody up and you drop them off. Well, it's your gas, it's your car insurance, it's the wear and tear on your car. Like, yeah, the technology behind it probably was very expensive at startup, right? Because why? They probably had to build out this tremendous amount of framework, and bring in all of these people to do the coding and the programming and so on. Again, and I don't know how in depth it is because I'm not an IT guy, but you got to imagine there was an expense associated with that. But here we are, how many years later, where now it's like, okay, we're going to add a feature, or we're going to update it, or we're going to patch it. It's not complete overhauls. And those things in today's day and age have become less and less expensive. It's like when the first flat screen TV came out and it was like $10,000. Now you can buy a flat screen TV for like $200 because it's just the technology's gotten so good that it's so easy to turn them over quick, 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 quick. So why is it that the Uber drivers aren't making more money on something that over the course of time, Uber's cost has actually gone down, right? Their expense has actually gone down, other than maybe their, because they're corporate employees, right? Or, I don't even know, website bill. I mean, even another thing that's relatively cost effective. So I just don't see how well, what I was saying is that camouflage, or that, um, you know, you know, hidden agenda, in my opinion, takes away from people's opportunity to say, you know what, I really just want to go out and try to do my own thing. Win, lose, or draw. Not everybody's guaranteed success, but which again, that's capitalism. So I'm not angry at them for it. It's just an education for people, right? What to look for. Let's be realistic and open our eyes to see what it really is, as opposed to sugarcoating it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I'd say like what you just had to say, like it really is true. Like how people don't understand, they don't see the full picture, because a lot of people would think, oh yeah, like I really am being my own boss, but they don't really look in depth to like what it actually is. Now, I would
Yeah.
say Uber and platforms like that, Uber, Lyft, things of that nature, taxis even, um, is kind of like it really is a blueprint. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people may not have an entrepreneurial mindset, but when you like apply to these programs, that would give you a platform where you can like set your own hours, as I said, have that sort of freedom while still working under somebody. So it's like people enjoy the freedom, they enjoy like the fact that they can feel like an entrepreneur, but at the end of the day, they're really not an entrepreneur. You know?
Yeah. What does that say though about our system as a whole? Like we're kind of getting off of what the conversation is, but the reality of it is it's not, because what it's basically showing you is how, um, I'll call it a system, right? Can in a myriad of ways essentially control the majority, right? And what do I mean by that? Like you go, like we had this conversation previously, but you go to school, and the ideology is you go to school and you graduate from high school, and then you go to college, and then you get a job and you work 9 to 5 and you get a salary and you get benefits and retirement packages, and then you get married, and then you buy a house, and then you have kids, and then you do this, and then you do that, right? It's like very like systematized, right? Bang, 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 bang. That's like training a dog. You know what I mean? As opposed to I believe the system should be, hey, if you want to go the corporate route, then there is that process. Or if you want to be your own boss, you can go kind of do that. But it shouldn't be like where they basically instill in everybody, this is what you should do, right? And Uber is an extension of that because why? Now they're identifying that maybe more and more people don't want to go that route, right? Because even though you have high enrollment in college and stuff, it's becoming harder and harder for just normal working class people to afford, right? So kids are like, okay, what can we do as an alternative, right? Well, Uber and society as a whole is identifying that. So what are they going to do to still capture that population that now is in this distressed situation but yet still needs some form of employment, right? What is it? They're going to turn around and they're going to do exactly what they did Uber. Here's a great opportunity for you to essentially be your own boss and dictate your own hours, right? Is that what it really is doing? Or is it just a way to kind of like I said earlier, it's camouflaging more of a bigger issue and a bigger problem that we need to address, right? Let's talk about the problems within Uber itself, right? You get in a car, well, you don't really know the individual who's driving you, and you don't as a driver, you don't know who's getting into your car. Isn't that scary? Would you just wander into a bad area of town, and not know people and just start to strike up a conversation? Like it's the same concept, right? Like we're supposed to accept like who's being vetted or the vetting process. We're supposed to just be okay with that. Have you ever tried to sign up for Uber, either of you?
Not Uber, but I tried DoorDash.
Okay, and how difficult of a process is that?
It's very tedious because when you try to do it, since I started and I only had my license for the year, I wasn't like qualified because they want like somebody who's been driving longer or age range because I was like 18 at the time and I only had my
Yep.
driver license for like about like a year, about 11 months or so. So they weren't like, I
Okay.
wasn't qualified for that. But it was annoying because they had to go through like a waiting list and it took like 2 weeks for them to respond back to just for them to say, oh yeah, you're not qualified,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
Oh
Finish.
yeah, I was gonna say, it was tedious in the sense that, and then they asked for like certain documents or like certain identification qualities and stuff like that, like almost like a background check just to be a driver, which I understand, but it was only for food. So I'm just imagining what it could be for like picking up picking up people in general, for like actually taking them to a destination.
So that's precisely my point, though. So, are the drivers background checked for criminal activity? How about this? I know you can't like. Is it discrimination if the driver feels uncomfortable about picking somebody up? Are you vetting the users? Because I mean, it happens in New York City all the time, or it used to too, where you got into a taxi cab and the taxi cab driver was assaulted or mugged, or you know what I'm saying? So you remember then they put up the big shields in between, the front and the back, so you couldn't even get to the driver. They took out like the ability to get like. The point is, you're getting to somebody's personal vehicle now, right? It's not a company issued vehicle. This is a personal vehicle that now somebody who gets in could have all the ill will intentions in the world and has direct and immediate access to that driver. And you have no idea. There's no protections, right? You have no clue. And how does that affect insurance, right? Insurance carriers have what's called rideshare endorsements or exclusions on the policies, which if you're not an insurance person, do you even know that exists? And does Uber and Lyft even know? And if they do, which they have a giant risk management department, I'm sure of it because of their exposure, do they even care? Maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not to say they do or they don't, but maybe they do. The point is, though, there's a lot of uncertainty in the area, even all these years after the app and the service first hit, right? Uber or Lyft or whomever. I mean, because there's others too, just smaller. The point being, though, there's so much time that still needs to go by and scenarios to play out and court cases and all these other things before there's really some kind of grasp on how to effectively control this thing. In New York City, and I think like inner city Chicago and some of these more metropolitan areas are trying to do that for certain reasons, by eliminating the ability to utilize it or to be an Uber driver and just basically be coasting in the five boroughs. You actually have to be there on a drop off in order to accept a pickup in the five boroughs because they're also killing the taxi industry, which ref. I mean, I don't know. You kind of talked on that a little bit earlier, but maybe you can touch on that if you know much about it. I don't know if you do.
About the taxi industry, I know just
Well, like
because
I mean, like how Uber and Lyft are somewhat damaging, the profitability of it.
of the profitability about what.
So, I mean, we were talking about earlier about how Uber and Lyft in particular, because of their prevalence and the ease, right, of calling an Uber versus flagging down a taxi cab. Uber for a very long period of time before they couldn't operate in Manhattan specifically or in New York City, taxi cab industry was getting crushed because why? They were losing all of that business. Everybody was just like, all right, I'm gonna hang out at the bar now. Let me order my Uber. Oh, it's outside. Let me walk outside. I don't have to go flag down a cab. Totally different model. It and that's what I'm talking about. And we were having a conversation about that earlier. That's why I said,
Okay.
Jeremy, I
Jeremy.
saw you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say I saw statistics saying that from now to 2026, taxes are actually predicted to go up by 7%. But I was reading into that because I was really curious. I was like, really? With Uber and Lyft, how is that possible? But then I read more into it, and it said with the access of robotic taxis, so basically automated taxis, we're making it more cheaper and more efficient to drive people around instead of being an actual driver, which cuts the cost for the drive by a little, by like maybe like 50 to $1 and some change.
50 cents to $1. So here, let me ask you a question. Just thinking through that, do you think here, like, how skewed do you think those numbers are? Because let's just say pre Uber, right? Taxi cab operators were making $1 million a year, and then during Uber, they're making 500 grand a year. They lost 50% of their business, right? Well, if they're going to see a 25% uptick because of these modifications, that's only $750,000 a year. They're still down 25%. So you get where I'm going? Are they actually up 25% or are they just down 25% versus being down 50%? You see where I'm going? Like the play on words. So, I mean, until you can actually see the statistical data on that and the actual dollars and cents, to me, it's a hypothetical. It may increase, and make it more profitable. But how far down were they? Are they back 100%? I doubt that. I like I said, I can't speak to a lot of areas, but I mean, growing up in the tri-state area, specifically metropolitan, New York, taxis were like a way of life. Like we we didn't have Uber when I was younger. I mean, we had taxis, or you had black car services, but that was for the people that could have that, or you had public transportation. You had the public bus, Beeline. Other than that, though, taxis was a way of life to get around town.
Yeah.
That has changed drastically. Similar to the way when I grew up, phones and computers and even devices like this, being able to do this is amazing, right? Having these, for lack of better words, conferences and or interviews or whatever you want to call them, virtually, while I'm sitting in a different part of the country and you're in another. I mean, that's amazing. That stuff didn't exist when I was a kid, so I'm not used to it. So, like, you guys were probably born with, cell phones, maybe not the iPhone, but like they had the Nextel flip phone with text messaging when you were kids or something. When I was a kid, they didn't even have a cell phone. The first phone was as big as a keyboard, and it's a brick. It's huge. But that becomes the norm. The norm, right? So for like my era, taxi cabs were the norm. For your era, and younger kids, ordering Uber and Lyft is the norm. Problem is, and again, getting back to the root of it all, for us, for the way I view it, and for the purposes of this video podcast, is what are the implications from an insurance standpoint? Because insurance is supposed to make people whole, right? It's supposed to indemnify. It's supposed to make sure if there's injuries or property damage that people are taken care of. There's too many uncertainties still to this day for it to be guaranteed. So case law and insurance claims over the course of time will hopefully help perfect that. But there's also a corporate responsibility for them to take that data and take that information and now implement different process and protocol to make sure that the people being driven around are actually protected, whether that eats away at their bottom line and their profitability or not. Make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Also too, just to kind of like backtrack a little bit, you said how Ubers, Lyfts, and taxis even are like very unsafe. How would you guys individually, like if you guys like own these companies or something like that, what would you guys put in place to where someone feels safe to go into a stranger's vehicle or whatever?
Well, I'll let Jeremy go first.
Yeah.
Well, personally, to make people feel safe, I feel like they already implemented this now. Also, like just standard GPS tracking, so people can locate where you are in an Uber. Also, what I would implement myself is probably send some type of camera or some type of like way for Uber drivers to verify that they dropped off their client or whoever they're picking up there. Like, oh, like here's the location where they want it, right here, or oh, like the driver is safe and in the back ready to go, or like even just send like a camera, like a little like camera to record on the side. Even though it might cost the company money, it would probably gain more trust from the public, saying like, oh, they really care about what's going on with the people that they're driving and just ensure more safety. And then also too, like if we really want to go hyper safety, you could maybe like do something, maybe like I don't know. This is like in a perfect world, have something where police, have something with the police. Maybe have like a contact where if somebody feels unsafe or if somebody feels like their life is being threatened at any point in time, that they have a straight 911 just SOS message straight from Uber to the police saying, "Oh, my Uber driver, this is their information. This is where they're at. They're threatening my life, or they did this to me, or they're threatening the life of somebody that is in an Uber right now. This is the location. Can you go get them right now, or can you go check it out?"
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
that's like my ideal hypothetical.
I mean, those are all great ideas, but and I'll kind of get off track and then I'll come back because I'm going to use it to come back. But a couple of weeks or months ago, I read an article where it was like a ridiculous percentage. It was like 75%, 72% of Gen Z is okay with the federal government putting a camera in their home to monitor them because they felt like, oh, we're not doing anything wrong, so if it's one camera in one place, I don't, to guarantee safety and so, which I sat back and I said to myself, that is such an intrusion of privacy, right? To your point though, and where I'm going to bring that back is the masses from all 4, 5, 6 billion, whatever it is, people in the world, whatever billions, right? The mass majority, I mean, how many people really want a camera in their face, right? Not to mention with all the data and privacy and security laws that are being developed now, does the Uber agreement now as a user utilizing Uber have to be modified to say, hey, by the way, you're accepting the privacy of your video being taken and being uploaded to a server somewhere which could be stored and now be utilized by third parties who are purchasing the data for facial recognition stuff down the road. See where I'm going? Like now you're talking about like a whole nother set of things going on, which while it may sound secure, it also leads to the potential loss of your private information through a breach somewhere. You get where I'm going? So, like, I mean, if you're asking me, ideally, what would I do from a safety standpoint to make it more safe and more secure? I mean, those are great suggestions, but again, that's something long term. I would probably say immediately, like I tell my kids, the most safe and secure thing to do is delete the app. Delete the app. Don't use it. It's called old school. Mommy and daddy will pick you up and drop you off. If you're old enough to drive, well, I'm not letting you drive yet until you're mature enough to drive. So I'll pick you up and drop you off, right? Like, if I'm in that position. If not, well, public transportation. Those are vetted because why? Don't the state, who's funding that? You can't be a government employee and have severe issues, right? So, not to mention you're getting on a bus with how many other people, right? So you have the massive people. Taxi cabs. I mean, again, that's okay too, but it's more of a one-on-one thing, but still okay if you're old enough. I'm not going to stick my 6-year-old in a taxi cab, and I'm definitely not going to stick my 6-year-old in an Uber. So I still say traditional until they map things out. Hey, autonomous cars, right? They got autonomous vehicles now, right? GM has vehicles that drive on the highway, right, by themselves. Not like the lane, keeping it in the lane. It's called Super Cruise, right? It drives the car, literally utilizing the camera system and GPS to identify where it is, and it will drive the car. It will make the little bit of turn. You put the blinker on, it will go into the right, like the whole nine. Insane technology. I will not use it, okay? Because why? It's not proven. Same thing with Tesla. Their autonomous technology is not proven. There's still people that get into these severe car crashes and die. So would you use it? Just because it's the cool thing? The cool new thing? I don't think so. I think I need time. Go ahead.
Right. So, first, let me just address the autonomous cars. Personally, I wouldn't do that. Just because we don't know about the significance of the technology yet to know if it's that 100% safe. So I agree with you on there. But the counter argument to what you're talking about with the data collection and would people be okay to have somebody watch them in their cars for their own, like to collect the data on them for their own safety in Ubers, I would say this. Because you talked about like collecting data in general, just like with people with the camera in their house and everything. I would say the kind of argument to that is what about logging on to apps such as Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, where they're already getting their data collected almost by the same medium, it's just not live. So it's like, oh yeah, I can take the data that you collect by posting this picture. Like, oh, this is the type of stuff that you're into based on what you're doing in this picture. Let's map it out to there, like the algorithm on TikTok. Oh, based on what you like and based on what you've seen or based on what you posted, this is what you're gonna do or this is what you most likely like. Same thing with Uber. Oh, if you just it's not as the same thing because that's tailored to what you like on social media apps. But Uber is just like, oh, based on the ratings and based on you can do facial recognition. People being like, oh, like people said like they could see the discomfort or they could do data on how people like maybe people's body language or maybe people how they react while they're in the Uber and be like, okay, this Uber driver is not maybe ideal for this type of environment. Let's switch it out with this Uber driver to see if they thrive more and more people be likely to switch it out. You get where I'm going? Just like
Yeah, I mean, listen, I get where you're going, but what I will say to that is, while you're accurate in what you're saying from a standpoint of, people are utilizing other services or other technologies that are essentially gathering or gaining the same access, and this is also something that's being utilized for a safety measure. I get that, but how many people, right, are actually aware of that? Like, it's becoming more and more known, but how many people, like, do you know your iPhone takes pictures of you like every 5 seconds right now when you hold it up? Apple didn't even release that until recently. It literally is taking snapshots of you. If you use a infrared camera and turn the lights off and use an you can actually see it taking those little snapshots every 5 seconds. So my point is, how do you think people feel about stuff like that, right? The mass majority don't even realize it because it's not publicized. It's the same way things are handled with the terms and the conditions of the apps and the software. Quick scroll and just accept. And you have now agreed to everything under the sun. And here's the crazy part. Years ago, before the technology made all that stuff that simple, just to scroll through 1,000 pages and just hit accept, stacks of paper like this. Now, would you walk into an attorney's office and just sign the last page if you were given a stack of paper? Would you do that? I don't think so. You read it, right? It was some form of a manipulation. I mean, think about it. If somebody hands you a piece of paper, you're more likely to read it than if somebody forwards you a message or something, or you open up an article on your phone. You're actually more likely to read it if it's actually physically in your hand. So, like, again, we're not sitting here. It's not. We're not bashing a company. That's not what we're here to do, and we're not doing that. It's just that there's also got to be this understanding that while they're great services, there's certain people for them, there's certain people not for them, right? But, but there's evolution, right? And they still have a long time before they evolve into what I would call not a perfect, not a perfect, company or a perfect system or situation, but as close to it as can be, right? Because there's still so many unknowns. That's what I'm saying. So many unknowns. So yeah, I mean, I use them every now and again, but I also have that hesitation in my mind. There's that uncomfort level when I do use them. That's me. That doesn't mean it has to be the same for you.
Raphael, any thoughts?
By the
Oh, sorry.
he wants to go drive he likes cars. He's right. He hears autonomous vehicles and his eyes.
Nah,
Yeah.
because you wanna know what? The reason why
But you like to drive. You like to drive.
the way they make you feel, Go back to
Yeah, you like to drive.
no backup camera, not a lot of technology. Just remember, that's a really driver experience. And that's what real car people look forward to. You know what I mean? But we know cars are changing, and everyone likes the new fancy stuff and all of the nicks and nannies and whatnot. But you know, I like to
I
keep
mean, I
it.
like some of the. You gotta like some of the technology in the car today, though.
Oh,
I was in a car where you press a button, and it's like back years ago when Los Angeles used to have like the hydraulic systems in the cars, right? I was in a car that has like these air suspensions. Like you press a button, all right, it doesn't do all that, but it actually raises and lowers. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff. I mean, so technology is great in many ways, definitely. But I'm with you. I like traditional. Give me a 5 speed. I mean, these days, even if they make a 6 speed, but now everything is this Tiptronic stuff. Which, speaking of like futuristic, flying cars. That's like a new thing, right? Flying cars.
you thought
Jeremy, you should check that out. Flying cars. They're taking orders right now.
I'll check
I
that
mean,
out later.
does it have to? I don't understand about that. Is FAA approved? Like, do you like where do you take off? Like,
let's,
how do you take off?
let's talk about it. Let's talk
Another
about
question I would say is, all right, for a flying car, right? How would you assess the risk of what would happen if you got into an accident? Like, would that like the insurance must be insane on
Yeah,
that? Like, that's
I
basically
was gonna say there is no survivor. All right, you get into a mid-air collision. There is no like, oops, my fender got pushed in. No, it's over. It's over.
life insurance is gonna go through the roof
I
on that.
well, here, think about that. Like, hey, I'm taking off, right? So I got to get to a certain speed to take off, right? Like, do you get a speeding ticket for trying to take off in your flying car? Like, whoop whoop, nope, time out. You were speeding. Pull over. Like I don't get it. Do you go to specific like roads that you can take off? I mean, it's crazy, but
this.
And the quick,
that's where it's heading.
like, do you need a different license for that? Because at that point, it's almost like a pilot's license.
Oh, you have to.
There you go.
You,
Yeah, so
you
it's
would
like,
have to have an air license. But like
If
my
you
vehicle
need,
will be running out of gas. Anyone ever think of that?
yeah, yeah. And how much is the gas? How much would the gas be?
You're paying for
Insane.
jet fuel or
Sure,
something. Like,
that
bro, there's so
you,
many.
I've actually had that happen where like you're on the road and you're like, all right, I got just enough to get to where I gotta go. I'll get gas. I'll get there in time. And boop, 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 boop. Like you imagine making that mistake as you're hovering like 10,000 feet above ground. Oh, that's a bad day. That's a rough one.
Oh, I can make it to the landing site, and you're just like, it's like, oh shit.
What a bad day. What a bad day. But anyhow, so I mean, do you guys have any other things you want to add? Because I mean, I think we touched on a lot.
I would say we definitely gotta touch on automation and just like the world of technology and just the world and insurance and everything else. Like in another later podcast, I really want to get like more into detail about that, especially flying car and just robotic and just like the robotic car aspect of autonomous cars. That was definitely an
That's
interesting
the whole
topic.
topic.
But I
It's
feel
a
like
scary topic, but you know, I'll end on this because we will touch on that at one point, or at some point. But you know, that stuff has been in the works for years. You know, like these. It's not like these car companies have just showed up one day and like 10 years, like 5 years ago or 2 years ago, and said, you know what, we're going to try to make self-driving vehicles. They've been working on this stuff for years behind the scenes. It's just you can't release something without it having, almost perfect results. And if you do, you have to be ready for all the backlash. That being said, it's not like it just started yesterday, but we will touch on it in another episode for sure. All right.
any thoughts?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody else? I got any closing thoughts? Anyone thing they want to say?
No, but I got to get my Uber to the airport, so let's roll.
Well,
So yes,
thanks for being on the podcast, Mark. We appreciate that.
No, anytime. Anytime. All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course, like we said.
All right. I'll talk to you guys.
and that wraps up today's episode of the Risk Channels podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, and remember, we got you covered from A to Z.